Hey guys, welcome to another episode of iOS versus Android development. Today we're talking about unit tests. We're actually going to add some unit tests to an app that I've already created that's on the iOS App Store and Google Play. So this will be good as I'm maintaining these apps to have these unit tests that I can run whenever I change functionality to see if I don't break anything. So the first test we're going to add is going to check to see if a function returns the expected value. And in order for this function to run, we need to have a array of people, or a person, type person. So I've already set that up. I added it here, and then I initialize it in setup. And it's always good practice to set it back to nil during teardown. So there's that. So let's add this test. And what this test is going to do is test the children's string. And what this method does is it takes in an array of people and then makes a children's string out of those people. So in this case, there are two children in this group. So what I expect it to return is let expected equal Ruby and James. Since there are two children, it should spit out Ruby and James, and the order should be Ruby and James because birth order is 1 and 2. Then the actual value is what we get when we actually run the function and compute it. So the function is called getChildrenString, and I will pass in the people to test array. And then to make this test actually check if this is working, we will do an xtt assert equal. We'll pass in what we actually got, what we expected, and then a string for when it fails. Alright, so if we run this, I'm just pressing this play button here, it should say test passed because this function, given the two children that's passed in, should spit out Ruby and James in that format. So let's test it. Test succeeded, so it's working as expected, and if we run this in the future after changing a bunch of things, we can see if it's still working. So I'm going to do another example, and in this case we'll actually need to wait for a response from Firebase. So that's a slightly different scenario when the testing criteria isn't readily available right away. So in this case, let's test that the directory is downloaded. So what this app does is it stores directory information, and I have a function in my Firebase client here that retrieves directory information. So we're going to test to see if that works. The first step here is to define an expectation. So let's let expectation equal an xc test expectation with a description, and this is the description of what success looks like. Directory downloaded. That's what we want to happen. So I'll just go ahead and type out the function that gets the data from Firebase. So now we're going to check to see if there was data received, and using a xct assert not nil, and it's going to take in the snapshot that we should get back, and then if no data was received, we'll say no data was downloaded. And then we're going to go ahead and say the expectation should be fulfilled by now. And here's the important part. Here's what gets the test to actually wait for this response. Say wait for expectation, and it's only going to wait 10 seconds. So this will allow for the time it takes to actually get this data, so that it doesn't return nil before we've actually had a chance to receive it. So let's test this out. So you can see the test succeeded. That means that this call to Firebase is working as expected. So let's do the same thing in Android. Just like in iOS, we have setup and teardown functions. And in the setup, we are going to initialize this array list of people, but we're also going to need a context. And if you're in this Android test section, you're able to use this instrumentation registry to get a context to work with. And that's part of Android JUnit 4. But let's remember to set these to nil or to null once we tear down. And then context equals null as well. And it's important to have these before and after annotations so the test knows what to run when. So we're going to implement the same tests as we did before. So we're going to check to see if that children string is being generated properly. So first what we'll do, we'll add a test annotation. All right, public void children string is correct. Have it throw an exception. And this children string method is actually a method of the entry object class. So I'll need to make an entry in this case. So let me import that. Then I'm going to set the people of the entry as the people that we initialized in setup. Then, just like before, I'm going to create an expected string as Ruby and James. Create the actual, which is the computed children string. Alright, and then the way to actually check to see if these are the same is to use assert equals. And we'll just throw in expected versus actual. And let's add that. Okay, so this should work. We'll test this by going over here and running grep test. And if we scroll this up, we'll see one test passed. That means that this expected string matched the actual computed string from the getChildrenString method. So let's add another test, one that deals with an asynchronous method to Firebase. So we'll go public void download directory, just like before, throws exception. We'll initialize Firebase and use that context we initialized before. And I'll go ahead and speed through this. So then checking to see if we receive data is as simple as actually saying assert true data snapshot exists. Let me add that. But this won't work right now because this call actually takes some time. So we need to have a way of checking for this once we know that we're done with the operation. So to do that, we will add a countdown latch, call it signal. We'll make it a new countdown latch, initialize with a value of 1. Then we will count down that signal, set it to 0, and the key thing to do is to wait for that countdown. So this is what's going to make this work even though this is an asynchronous call. So let's test to see if this works. You can see all 2 tests passed. So we're able to test to see if this function works correctly and if we're getting data when we request the directory information from Firebase. So which one's better? Well, they both pretty much do the same thing. There's nothing fancy going on really with either of them. So I'm going to go ahead and say it's a tie. Let me know what you think in the comments, and thanks for watching.